to see what is best to do to build truly this outstanding nation called Nigeria. And like I always tell people, Nigeria is an extremely blessed country, blessed in many ways, blessed with resource, blessed with people, blessed with everything good that you can think about. And our guest today is the co-founder and pioneer managing director, chief executive officer of EdFin Microfinance Bank, and the first specialized education finance bank. And that's why, or part of why she's going to be talking a lot on education on this particular platform today. And the bank commenced operations in 2019, and one of the shareholders is Grey Matters Capital USA, an impact investment company with significant investments in education finance institutions in India and Pakistan. She's also on the board of the Education Reform and Innovative Team, ERT, an NGO, whose vision is to ensure that every learner in Nigeria has unfettered access to quality education. She was an advisory board member of Bridge International Academies Nigeria, a global for-profit school with chain operations in Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, and so on and so forth. She's also passionate about financial inclusion, SME financing, and of course, gender inclusion. She's on the board of EFINA, Enhancing Financial Innovation and Access, Vice President of Women in Finance, Nigeria, and member of the Board of Trustees, FinTech Association of Nigeria, chairman of Fiducia Clearing Services, and also a director at Triumph Ventures. Master's degree in Business Administration from the IESE Business School, University of Navarra, and an alumnus of the Lagos Business School. And like me, a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, and a member of the Chartered Institute of Bankers, and so on and so forth. A mother with two lovely adult children. Please welcome with me my sister and my friend, Mrs. Bunmi Ajani Lawson. Bunmi, good to see you. And thank you.
Same here, Pastor. Thank you.
Huh?
I said same here. Good to see you.
Good to see you. And thank you for joining us and also being on the platform from time to time. I'm sure you know quite a bit about ALG and the Nigerian Leadership Series, which is our attempt at creating a new Nigeria, sourcing the right kind of leadership, and making sure that we send the right kinds of information downstairs to every single Nigerian as to what we should do with this, our great nation. And I know that you've been very passionate about Nigeria, especially in the finance and the education sector. And you've been able to marry both of them nicely together and so on and so forth. So tell us, what's it with education in Nigeria and where are we on that spectrum in this country?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's indeed an honor to be here to talk about this topic. And it's true, I've been joining from time to time, and I see a lot that has been talked about nation building, and even in the area of education as well. So thank you for having me. I would want to share a few slides with you, also that, you know, I'll just take you along, just lay the context before we get into the conversation. So let me quickly do that and share these few slides with you. Okay, great. Okay, I hope, yes, you can see the slides. So the power of education in nation building. I'll just briefly cover 4 key areas. Nation building, why is it important? The Nigerian education, where are we? What's the state of education in Nigeria? And then some suggestions on what to do. And also talk about the Students' Loan Act, because as Pastor said, I'm particularly interested in finance as well as education. And that act actually just combines those two areas. I wanted to share this picture with you, why nation building is important. And, to just share with you what's happening in the world. Today, or even today, they are still hunting for those who are in the Titanic submarine. 5 people, billionaires, I think 3 or so of them, the son, father, 2 billionaires, and so on. And if you look at the resources that were devoted to trying to get them back, to hunt them down. Yet, this ship have hundreds of migrants in the Mediterranean that drowned just last week. And the efforts, I was reading this article, an online article that talked about the fact that in the UK, every newspaper covered the fact that the Titanic had sunk. I mean, this Titanic submersible had sunk with this billionaire, 5 people, but hardly anyone in those newspapers covered the fact that over hundreds of migrants had sunk into the Mediterranean. And, the headline said, the summary of the article was that the migrants count for nothing compared to billionaires. And I wanted to link it to the issue of nation building. That if we continue to remain a poor nation, no matter how many we may be, because, we always count our numbers as being very important, we may end up, like the migrants, forgotten and not relevant. And so when we talk about nation building, it's not about one person or 2, but it's the nation as a whole. What future do we have, to really build in Nigeria, to making sure that we are relevant in the global scheme of things? So global relevance is important. In future, if there's scarcity of resources, we don't want another slavery or colonization. And that's the risk when you have largely uneducated people, citizens, and people that live in poverty. 63% of Nigerians live in poverty. And if we continue that way without building this nation, we would remain irrelevant. You won't be able to go out and be proud to say, oh, I'm Nigerian, if we continue to do that. And only God knows what the future would hold. There may be a new form of colonization that could happen. And the future, I put it that the future is XXX intelligence, intelligence. If you are talking about artificial intelligence, how much more the intelligence of human beings? And intelligence here is not just the ability to acquire knowledge, that's to think, is how to apply that knowledge and skills in a manner that adds value. And it takes a community. So one of the key messages I'm hoping that I will be able to leave today is that it's not enough for us to just educate our own children. So yes, they can live a good life, they can, live in the posh areas of Nigeria. But if on average, Nigerians are not living well, living in poverty, it would affect the entire country. And as I'm sure that we all know and see. So I wanted to share the state of the Nigerian nation. This was our last budget, the current budget, 2023. Total revenue, only 10 trillion compared to expenditure of 21 trillion. So we have a deficit of 11 trillion. We are not making enough money, bottom line. So people talk about, yes, we are borrowing, there's high debt, and so on and so forth. The issue is that we are not wealthy enough. When they compare it to a company, it's like not making a turnover, but you have this huge expenditure. Yes, you are borrowing money, but that's not sustainable as a country. And so if we look at our debts, we have $41 billion that we are already owing. But I wanted to focus more on the issue of revenue because it is wealth that really builds a nation. When we talk about nation building, what are we talking about? It's about the wealth that the citizens on average are able to live a good life. So, but where are we making money from? So this chart, unfortunately, the colors are not so contrasting, but on the top one, you have non-oil sector as a percentage of our GDP. Where are we making that money from? And you will see that oil, is only roughly single digits, around 6%. Let's just say an average of 6%. But when you then come down to the GDP component itself, you see that services is the largest with roughly 52% over the years, certainly more than half. Then agri is roughly around 30%. And then industry is only 18%. So that just tells you about even the level of human capital that we have. Most of what we are doing, services, agri, industry is so small. So the industry is where you are adding more value to that. And services, we are not really exporting. So what I did was to look at what are we exporting? So that's how do we generate revenues from outside of Nigeria to increase our wealth. So if you look at that, you'll see that we are largely making all our revenues from just extraction and exporting of raw materials. From crude oil, it's even stated crude oil, it's not even refined oil. Agri goods, raw materials, solid minerals too is extraction. See services, zero is almost negligible. So that even though services is a huge part of our GDP, we are not using it to earn foreign currency or any import. So that certainly restricts our revenue or even the wealth of a nation. Nothing's being done there. So the only look at manufacturing goods, just less than 3% of what we are exporting. So why is nation building important? We just have to make sure that we are wealthy so that we continue to remain relevant. And research has shown that where less than 70% of your population are illiterate, you are not going to have economic growth. You would. So when they studied countries that were able to transition from being a poor country to one that is wealthy, they found that the barrier was that you should actually have at least 70% of your population that are literate. In Nigeria, we're roughly about 63%, but then there's so much disparity across states. And that's why you even see wealth disparity as well across Nigeria. So those things are, how do we get people educated? There was, yes, this chart that I want to show. This really studied all the countries and said, how are they able to move from being a poor country into one that was economically developed? And most started off with agri and land reform. Land reform releases capital, but they moved on to industrialization. That's what made this sustainable. When you reach a certain fertility rate, so 3 children per woman, and literacy rate is at least 70%, because that is what defines your human capital. If you have too many children, for instance, you are spending all your money, no national savings and all of that. So you are not able to actually develop the nation. So, and then literacy means that you are not able to have the people that would translate our resources into value-adding things that we can sell. So those were the things that were done. So what does it mean to be educated? This is another thing I also wanted to highlight, because a lot of us talk about going to university. That's, to me, when we are talking about nation building and what type of education we need for nation building, is just 5 things: the ability to read, the ability to write, critical thinking, having a set values. What identifies us as Nigerians? What's our culture and values that we want to live by is very important. And then skills. We focus so much on skills, living, especially the values and the ability to think. And all of 5 of them are actually required. So as we reform our education system, we need to make sure that it addresses all these 5 areas. Let me quickly move on. So I belong also, I'm a board trustee of ERIT, which is an education reform and innovation team. And I've done a lot of work on the state of education. So I've used a lot of the work that ERIT has done. One of the things I will ask you to do is to join them to also support reforming education. So in recent times, one of the things that we've done is to put out there the need to make sure that we have a competent minister of education who really would transform Nigeria, because we are in dire straits. So it was published in newspapers. We hope that they got to read it. We also tried to send it directly so that we highlight the skills that are needed for someone who would be that education minister to really transform education, because it is critical in Nigeria. So an extract of what we wrote in there gave a summary of the state of education in Nigeria. And I will just highlight those parts that are in red. Number one, we're losing every day the opportunity to positively impact the Nigerian child. The issue with Nigeria is that it is with education is that it's time bound. So for instance, if we say, okay, I'm going to repair education in 4 years, what happens to those children that are growing up in that 4 years? So as you grow older, sometimes it's not even sometimes, you lose the ability to learn. It becomes harder to learn than when you're a child. So those are things, so that there's a time issue to education. So we need to start doing it now. So every day, 55 million learners, because we are largely a youthful population and growing to go to schools that are dilapidated. They don't have books, libraries, workshop, I'm sure you can read it. Then, not only that, we have early childhood care is almost non-existent. So early childhood enables children to learn faster, and you will find that they do better in school when we start. So 22 million of our children, of those within that age band, are not in any form of early childhood care or development education, formal. That is 13 million. At the time we were writing this, it was 13 million that officially the federal government says are out of school. It has actually grown to 20 million, that Guardian publication. Then when they go to primary schools, those that go, the 55 million, only they go and we don't have enough teachers. 40% of them lack foundational competencies to teach. UNESCO estimates that in sub-Saharan Africa, we need 6.3 million teachers between now and 2023 to be able to teach in primary schools, another 10 million in secondary schools. And yet, especially in Nigeria, you find that our population, especially in basic education, continues to grow. And then this one focuses particularly on Nigeria, whether those teachers actually have skills. 40% or more, especially in the northwestern states, don't have any form of teaching certification. So we do have a problem or a crisis when it comes to teachers, and the numbers are not enough, but even the skills for teaching, you'll find are largely inadequate. So if at the tertiary level, they are going to dilapidated schools, they don't have good teachers, and they are just pushed on to junior secondary school, you'll find that they're functionally illiterate. They are not able to read and write. And I've heard a lot of employers talk about even graduates. You ask them to write a letter and you have to edit the whole thing all over again. And between that primary and GSS, the number of dropouts is really, really high. Senior secondary schools we don't have enough of them to cater for all people who pass through GSS. So 84% dropout, only 16% are enrolled in senior secondary school that enter GSS. And it goes all the way to university. You know the JAMB crisis, how many of them actually are not able to get into university. Technical colleges, we only have space across the nation for just slightly above 500,000 students. So we don't have enough space and so on and so forth. So, I don't want to spend too much time on the problems, I want to delve more into the solution. So one of the things I looked at here was to put this the girl child in school, and hopefully she becomes one that celebrates a graduation. But that journey is really tough in Nigeria, because even those entering our universities with the strikes and so on, you are guaranteed that it will go on for longer than the 4 years. The quality of teaching and learning is so poor, fit to job market. It's just a real problem, our education. And so when we talk about having even the 63% is basic levels of reading and writing that you will find. Again, we look at what is government now doing to repair this. We have this problem, but UNESCO says we should spend roughly 6% of our GDP in education area. Over the last 10 years, Nigeria has not spent up to 1% of its GDP in education. And the issue of spend, that's our budget that we have actually allocated, is really low. But also is that even when they allocate this, especially for capital expenditure, we are not spending it. So when you go back to look at the reports on how much of the capital allocations are actually spent in education, most times we struggle. None in that last 10 years, we haven't actually spent 60% of those capital allocations. Now, so the issue is some people say, oh, let's increase the budget, but what are we spending the money on is also a critical issue. So the budget has consistently been lower than the benchmark for a thriving education sector. And if you look at countries like China, they are spending at least 4 to 5% of their GDP. And you know that China's GDP is about 3 or 4 times ours. So in the last 5 years, consistently. India, the same thing. UK, 4.4%. Canada, 6% on education. So it tells you the focus there. So I also wanted to just highlight some other things. Gender issues. There are some states where more than 80% of the women do not even have access to education at all. I wanted to highlight Nigerians in diaspora. And I would say that if you look at the Nigerians in diaspora, I would say that maybe up to 80%, there's no real study of Nigerians in diaspora, are educated, but they remit at least 25 billion to Nigeria. So it tells you that if you are educated, you may have access to wealth. And that remittance is only a portion of their income. So it's just to show that if Nigerians themselves are educated, then we would be able to create wealth. I want to pause here again just to talk about areas. Now, if we imagine the future, how do we operate in an artificial intelligence world without education? How do you become a high-income nation without education? One person that I attended their webinar was saying that they haven't seen any rich country that was driven by an illiterate population. So education certainly is critical. One of the things we did in ARIS was to then drill down to the root cause, because all the things that I've talked to you are the symptoms of a bad education system. What causes it? The number one reason was poor governance and management, because even as I list the number 2 to 10, the reason why we don't have adequate number of teachers, poor teaching skill, it still drills down to poor governance and management, because maybe if we had the adequate schools, maybe teachers were paid well, you know, all the policies that are required, maybe we would have adequate number of teachers. So the second most important thing is that we don't have enough teachers, nor do they have the proper teaching skill. Curriculum is also largely irrelevant to what the employers need. The key issue for the curriculum though is what is our national development strategy? We need to define it so that you're able to then tailor your education system to align with that national development strategy. So I always say that the Chinese did it. They knew they wanted to go into manufacturing. Scholarships, grants for engineering and fields that were relevant to the nation was encouraged. India did it. They knew they wanted technology. In fact, they started establishing single universities. I remember when I went to India, a single building, and all they teach in the entire university is a BSc computer science. So that alignment, what is our national strategy? We need to define it and align it. And then use of technology, then socioeconomic factors, of course, poverty. When we are not able to eat 3 square meals, you would rather your child go and start selling so that the family can eat than to send them to go and sit down in school. So we need parent support, education, funding, and so on and so forth. I would skip that and just focus on this quote by the president. It was his the past president, not the current president, says in 2021, our diaspora remitted 20 billion and they invest in healthcare, agri, education. I just highlight this because if you have an educated populace, this is what they will do. They will create wealth. They will invest in businesses, our healthcare, agri, education. things that would make sure that on average we have sustainable and equitable wealth. And I talk about equitable wealth because the bottom of the pyramid too needs to have wealth. It's not enough for us to say we are creating wealth and only the top gets richer, whereas the poor continue to get poorer. We need equitable wealth where everyone is getting better. Not that we are taking from the rich and giving the poor, but that everyone has the ability to generate wealth, to live a good life. So solutions I recommend, number one is get the right people to man education, both at the national level, state level, the commissioners of education. Then the structure within those two needs to be reformed. We have too many parastatals overlapping. It is, just too many things. I just sort of feel that you need structural reform and making sure that we have a team who is courageous enough to deliver on education. I was going to say, do what the president has done in the last 2 weeks to shake up the nation. That needs to be done in education. So restructure those parastatals. Then funding, of course. What are we spending on so that it's not on recurrent paying salaries? Of course, teachers need to be paid, but what we see is that you have too many parastatals and support staff are earning so much and, than those who are actually, so how does that money trickle down into the schools and create learning? And then we need innovation in that funding. How are we looking at how we set up schools? And of course, I feel that basic education should continue to be free. That's where you learn those 5 things I talked about in terms of education, the ability to read, write, think, have values as well as skills. That's where it starts from. Every Nigerian child goes there. So if you have 5 million people going through basic education, and yet only 1 million going to universities, where should we be spending our money? So that's basic education has to be, and tertiary should have some elements of payment. It should be commercial. And I feel that's where the Students' Loan Act comes in. So, but I will leave that to maybe the question and answer time. Teachers, I've talked about. And the curriculum. Define our national development strategy. Where do we want to focus? I try to highlight what I see as Nigeria's strengths. So agric and manufacturing, we have fertile land, but it's not just planting and exporting the raw material. How do we convert them into goods? So we do need that manufacturing skill, and that takes skills. Then the creative industry, from film to filmmaking, fashion, everything, we are really good. Then technology, especially fintech, services, as you can see, medical. I like 5 things. You can see, if you look through the slide, you see that normally once it passes 5 things, I feel people don't remember. So, or maybe I'm the one that doesn't remember, but 5 things. So what are those 5 things? And then let's tailor our curriculum, education, the funding, everything to supporting those skills. And everything can be solved with education. It's just one part. I just feel it's the foundation for nation building. So the Minister of Trade and Commerce should then create jobs, agric. Everybody has a role, but for education there just needs to be alignment to the national development strategy. I said I would take this later. So, but the key takeaways I want people to go away with is that nation building concerns all of us. It's not about sending your own families to the best schools and so on. We need to make sure that everyone has access to education so that we can at least I feel that at least 80% of Nigerians have access to quality education that gives them those 5 skills that are required to be called educated. So we need to support credible NGOs. We need to hold government accountable. So like our publication, I said, Eric did. We need to do that. We need to talk out more and highlight the issue of education. Then education is critical. Those 5 things, read, write, think, values, and skills. How do we develop them? Use technology. I know educators always like classrooms and so on, but we just need to have more use of technology so that we can scale the ability of a teacher to teach more children. So that's not that we eliminate teachers, but that the use of technology enables maybe a teacher, because normally you talk about 1 teacher to 20 or 25 students. we need technology to be able to reach more, for us to catch up. So those are the things that, and then I feel that the student loan is a step in the right direction, because when you make universities independent and generate revenue, then you don't want to eliminate or say the poor cannot go to university. So that's an opportunity for them to be able to do that. So there's some reform that is required in the student loan. If we have time, I'm sure if you want us to discuss it, we will do that. Then equitable wealth is, to me, the most important thing. Yes, internally we should generate revenue, but what's sustainable is externally generated revenue. We need exports. We need the ability to sell our skills, services, our goods to other countries so that we are earning money, and then that really makes us sustainable. So import substitution is good to me as a first step, but really is just driving exports. Import substitution is like the money you already have, you're just circulating it within yourself. To me, we need to be able to generate additional wealth. I have an argument that we need at least 6 times our current revenues to actually be able to become what is called a wealthy nation, given the rate of growth of our population. We could go into how those numbers were generated later. Thank you very much for listening to me. And then I'm open for questions, and let's have the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bunmi. That is a really, really wonderful presentation. And I think the question of who our Minister of Education should be has been solved, because I would very much like to put forward your name. You seem to... Honestly, Bunmi, if I can sneak your name in there, I will sneak it in and then just say to Bunmi, wave this wand and let our people be educated. There's some things you've said that I've always known, but you really brought it home right there in my solar plexus. And that is, if you have a nation, if I just finished a meeting with a young lady, and she was trying to ask me, what is the point of ALG? What are we trying to do? And I was trying to explain to her that what we need is a fundamental reorientation of the average Nigerian. It's not just a question of this or that or the other one. Even if you have a good leader and the average Nigerian is badly orientated, they will never be able to support that leader or know what that leader is doing or appreciate what he's doing. A lot of my politician friends who are good people have been frustrated, because while they are trying to tell people, look, I will build a bridge for you, I will do this, I will increase this, they will say, whoa, George, Ibing Power, we're hungry. Why are you disturbing us with this thing? So you can't even convince them to vote for you on the basis of doing good to them, because their level of their thinking is so big, so it cuts bits against the grain. And then the way you nicely put it is that if any nation that at least 70% of the populace are not literate is going to have serious developmental issues. So it means that we need to work hard to make sure that 70% of our population can think, can read, can write, have the right set of values, especially in this very changing world. And they are economically productive. A nation where everybody can at least earn enough to look after themselves, their basic needs, their financial needs, and educate their children. This is a nation that's prospering. But a nation where every morning you wake up, you get, send me money a lot, send me money a lot, send me money a lot. You get it every day, because the people feel so helpless. They feel they're unable to help themselves, I get it every day from all sorts of people, because they just don't feel empowered enough to feed themselves. So it's pulling the entire nation down. So I have only one question. I've just tried to summarize what I've learned from you today. Is that maybe 2 questions? Then I'll hand it over to Pastor Sonny, or I hope he's on the platform, to take it from there, and then Jumoke will take it from him. I have two questions, and I just want you to pick into the ball. And then I also want you to speak a bit to this scholarship or grant or whatever this new government has brought up now, this education loan, and what does it really mean, and what is its impact on our country, or what impact will it have? But two questions is this. Why have successive governments in Nigeria refused to fund education appropriately? Is it that they don't know the value of education, or I don't know? Why has that been a thing? If you can offer a suggestion to that. And number two question is, how can Nigeria leapfrog very quickly now? If you're a minister of education, if you're president of Nigeria, how would you quickly leapfrog Nigeria into making it quickly well-educated in the shortest possible time, bearing in mind the fact that you also have a highly illiterate adult population, so adult education, you've said that education should be at a certain age where people learn quickly. But then a lot of people have missed that age, and they're still part of the population. They're still part of the population for another 20 years. How can we leapfrog or quickly educate those ones also? What will be the education emergency solutions you'll offer for Nigeria? And then speak to this issue of the scholarship or the education bank that Bola Ahmed Tinubu is just decided on recently. Thank you. Then, Sonny, you take it from there.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. I like the very first question about why haven't governments funded education so far? And I feel largely it's because it's not a quick win. I also have another theory so that I will share, but it's because it's not a quick win. That's not what people see. When you come into government and you build roads, you put up buildings, everybody sees that and celebrates it. But with education, it's almost like it at least takes 15 years before you start to reap those benefits. I think it's the same thing why we don't have electricity today. If you look at the investment, at least talking to a few people, it's something that you're going to start building. Look at how long the Dangote refinery took. Over 9 years. So the government would have gone and everybody would say you haven't done anything. So people don't see it. So therefore, politicians, I feel, don't have an incentive to invest in it. But the other thing that I've heard people say is that people don't want to invest in education so that the public or the citizens don't hold them accountable. So, we have high levels of corruption and so on and so forth. So I know that's another theory, but I want to believe that people are good. So that is really because it's an investment people don't see, and that may not get you to win the election. In fact, if you educate everyone and you haven't done anything, they may then just vote you out. So I would suspect that is it. But also that maybe we haven't defined a national strategy. What is our vision for Nigeria? Something that, is powerful enough for everyone to buy into. So that would direct where people can, sort of invest when it comes to education. How do we leapfrog? That's why I try to say to myself, what does education mean? You understand? So if I was going to choose out of those 5 things, especially, to make people literate, is the ability to read and write. That's one the first 2 things. So how do we scale that? So when I look at, first of all, I'm not going to be Minister of Education, but if I was, able to influence, I would certainly—
Don't dodge out of it, or don't dodge out of it. Don't dodge out of it.
Qualified than me, so I can make recommendations. There are people qualified than me, that's why. So, but I just sort of feel that I will focus on basic education and invest in the ability for people to read, write, and think. I know educators may not like me for this, so I'm not going to be so bothered about, I must have a science lab, I must have, all the subjects, I remember when I was in secondary school, I went to a comprehensive secondary school, we were doing almost like 15 subjects. I don't know how many of them I use today, but to me, if it's literacy that leads to national development, the ability to read, write, and think, and maybe values I will add, but I'm thinking that values we can sort of do like a national orientation and all those kind of things. So it doesn't have to be only through formal school, but that read, write, and think, and then use technology for that in such a way that people can teach people. So what's our NYC doing? What are retirees doing? So that there's this reading and writing national program for both adults and children, even those out of school. I would also have flexible time. So it's not only in the mornings that you can go to school, all the way to evening rotation. So there should be morning, afternoon, and evening school. So because if people can't eat or are not earning an income, you can't force them and say your child should just go and sit down in school. You understand that's what they see. Because as I said, the investment on education takes 20 years to be seen. So let's have flexible school time so that maybe the child goes to sell in the morning, sleep in the afternoon because they'll be tired, and then in the evening they are doing reading and writing. Let everybody have the ability to read and write so that in future, if they now want to go on and develop further skills, they have what it takes to go on the first rung of the ladder. And I will say that this idea of read and write is because of my microfinance experience, because that's what microfinance does. We just put you on the first ladder of wealth creation on the business. Then we feel that you'll be able to climb. So that's what I would do to just transform literacy in Nigeria. And then to sort of the student loan is a loan. So I do feel that there's a place for grants. We've actually, as Eric too, we are working on a paper that we want to send to government on how to restructure the student loan so that it actually works. So there's some things in the law that we believe should be changed. I feel the use of technology. There are 4 key areas that I felt technology could be used: an application portal, so that no university can hold any student to ransom. But when I did the numbers, what are the sources of income? It just comes to about 42 billion. It's not just, 42 billion annually. That 42 billion, if 20% is spent on overheads and 80% is given as loan, it will reach about 60,000 students every year. So that's a sizable number of poor, the poor, if they, want to go to university or tertiary education. So, so that's 60,000, but, we are talking about 55 million people having that ability to read and write, and 50 million for the student education. To me, the student loan fund is a tool to enable the low-income families have access to education, but it's not a cure-all for the education system. So something else needs to be done. It's a good tool to enable the poor going, but it's not it's not going to solve the problem of the education that we have, especially when it comes to nation building. But it's not something to be condemned either. Change some parts of the law, like the guarantor, why should it be a public servant? Different, are they saying pastors, for instance, cannot be guarantors or even bankers, so I don't know why it's only civil servants and lawyers. The amounts, the entry level, the 500,000 is actually too low. If you look at minimum wage, it gets you to 720. Why not benchmark to poverty levels or to the minimum wage? So that way you don't have to keep changing the law. Will the 500,000 stay there forever? So those are some of the things that we felt to be changed. But to me, largely is use technology, partner with organizations. So 4 areas: the applicants portal, universities need a portal. Then you should liaise with credit bureaus, because how do the employers know that you've taken a student loan? Go on to the credit bureau portal and you see, and they have unique numbers. NYC to universities themselves need a portal. So we know what's happening to students as they go in. Are they graduating? Did they drop out? What happens to people who drop out? Then you say repayment is 2 years after NYC. College of Education and TVETs are allowed. I don't think TVET go for NYC. What happens to, so there are some gaps, but there are things that can work. I did research. So many countries actually have a student loan and grant and scholarship scheme, and it works, and people are using it. Repayment is very, very small. Repayment is just is one of the indicators. It's not, shouldn't be the major indicator. Oh, are they repaying the loan? And then people say, okay, then give it as a grant. So a grant to me is a 0% repayment. So even if 50% repay the loan, it's still better than zero. So those are the things with the student loan. I think you could reform it and make it work. Thank you.
So you think by and large it's a good policy, and you think the government will implement it very well and it will work and achieve its results?
Again, governance and management. If you choose the right person to lead that student management loan fund, it would work. But you need to change the law. You need to change some aspects of that law and then use technology. There are ways. I've been lending to low-income households for almost 20 years. It works. So, but you know, the thing is you have to be genuine. So for instance, I want to apply for a loan and I pay a bribe. I'm not going to repay that loan because I've already paid a bribe. So it means, to me, it signals that you're not serious about collection. Would you, so those are some of the things. You need to make sure that there are none of those barriers. Then when it comes to repayments, there are so many things. BVN, NIN, we already have that. You have to incorporate it. You have to use technology. We have credit bureaus. So as you disburse the loan, report to a credit bureau. Anybody who is employing a staff has to go and do a credit check to see if they are owing any loan, and they deduct it. We have tax numbers now. NYC numbers should be inputted, student numbers. All of that must be on the portal. If you are doing it manually, it's not going to work. So those are the areas. And we have enough fintech companies that have designed fantastic apps, portals, and all of that to make it work. That to me is non-negotiable if you want to make the student loan work, that you need to link it to the technology and change some aspects of the requirements like the guarantor and the entry levels and so on.
Okay. Do you think we have enough institutions in Nigeria to absorb the education demand? Let me call it education demand. At this point in time, we have 13 million children out of school or 20 million children out of school. You have another 40 to 50 million children or youth not properly educated, educated to such an extent at which they are valuable to themselves and can produce economically. So there's a huge gap, I think, in terms of demand and the supply of relevant education. How do you think we can bridge that gap, if possible?
Yeah. So to me, as I said, basic education, and that's why I like Bridge International Academy. I know there's some controversy around Bridge, but what they were trying to do was to try to scale, have a model that can scale so that you can quickly standardize education for at least 1 million children. So I like that idea, so that the building or the infrastructure is not the issue, but that there's a safe space for children to learn to read, write. Teachers have, automated or designed curriculum that they actually impact on students, so that you don't have to be a super qualified teacher, in quotes. I mean, you have NYC and some ability to teach, but you don't have to be PhD holder or, some people say, oh, for you to teach primary school, you must have even an advanced degree. No, so I think that Bridge model can be scaled up. It would enable us reach more students. And then one of the ideas I shared with the Commissioner for Education in Lagos was the use of existing facilities. So churches are largely closed during the week. Why aren't we using those buildings to then train children during those times that they are not in use? Community leaders in very far areas could, be taught how to become teachers, so they're teaching people to read and write. And then even there was a palliative that was announced at that time, $800 million. Use that to pay those poor families. That if your child comes to this school, I will pay you that at least poverty level fee, so that is the way the child is earning for the house, so that they are sending them to school to read and write. So that I just sort of will drill down the curriculum to the bare minimum, maybe, but at least it gives you the ability to read, write, and think and have value. So that is the way I would go about scaling up. We certainly don't have enough rooms or classrooms to train everybody that needs to be trained. So that's why I feel like we need to be innovative about how we educate or think about education. Of course, the best is to have, a Corona or a Grange or Green Springs, for everyone, but it's not going to happen. I don't believe that. We don't even have the money to be able to do that for all the people that need to. So we can't say because we don't have that, then they should then be totally illiterate. They should be literate, read, write, think, skills, and values.
Okay, I'm going to hand over to Jumoke now to take Otaji Faye, Tonwa Jibade, Professor Grange, and I don't know who is iPhone's questions, okay? Maybe you take the first 3 or 4 questions and then you respond. But my own last question is this, and this one I'm a bit involved. The federal government is controlling quite a lot of federal government schools and even tertiary institutions. A few states also control quite a few schools and institutions. Do you think government should be owning and controlling and managing schools? And if they should, what way should they be doing it to make it more efficient? And if they don't, or if you don't think they should, how should the federal government or the state government unbundle themselves from these schools that they've tied to themselves and is a huge burden to them to some extent? Some are not being managed well, although I know quite a lot of civil servants probably profit from the procurement and the budgets that go to these institutions. And for a long time, I must confess, they have resisted the handover of the schools back to owners or back to private sector. A lot of the resistance is actually from government, civil servants, especially the Ministry of Education. So I don't know what your thoughts are there. And then Jumoke, please take over from him.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that question. So I think it's a mix. I do feel that education is a public good. So for basic education, I do feel government should have be able to offer primary and maybe up to JSS 3 and not maybe the full secondary. But it should be a partnership. So for instance, in the US, they have charter schools. So where you have private schools, the government really needs to say, what's the cost to train a child? What's the cost per child? And then for that cost per child, encourage charter schools so that government is then paying those school fees. They don't have to own all the schools. So yes, what we currently, I feel that, especially in some places that maybe the population is not that high, it's hard to reach, it's expensive to set up, government needs to run schools there because people have to be educated. But I do think that public-private partnership where government then just pays the cost of educating a child to those private schools, but maintain standards. So government needs to focus on how do we ensure that they're giving quality education? What are the basic or the minimum requirements that all those schools should have? And that way you're getting paid by the number of students who come to your school and so on and so forth. So I do think that is a mix of the two that is required. And so the Constitution also provides that states should have provide basic education. Federal looks at university. I think there's too much focus on university education. That's where I actually feel that government should withdraw and focus more on supporting the states to be able to provide basic education. So I suspect that professors and all those listed at universities may want to shoot me, but that's what I truly, truly think. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam. I just also wanted to second the notion that you should be up for Minister of Education. Your presentation was brilliant and very insightful. Thank you. I have one question, and we have about 4 people's hands that are up. How do we also incorporate critical thinking into our curriculum, because I see that that is a missing component when you even engage graduates or even artisans. So if you could speak a little bit about that, and also technical education, like really, it's not everyone that's going to be able to go to college, as you said. So how do we enhance our technical training and make sure that artisans are professionals as well? And then we'll take the questions that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So how do we incorporate critical thinking? It is the curriculum review. I feel a lot of using of games and research, so with the artificial intelligence, for instance, is something that I feel schools shouldn't ban people from using. If that's going to be the future, it even behoves us to be able to think better, because that would then be the difference between a human being and this artificial intelligence, our ability to think. So we need games to be incorporated. To me, when I think about what are the things that probably helps me or my children or those I know to think, we're more around those games that we did, people even talk about chess, but I think that's even advanced. But how do you building blocks like Lego, all those games should be included as part of our curriculum. Problem solving, not, our teaching, typically our students just cram and pour it back out. How are they thinking, So for instance, if you take artificial intelligence, an exercise could be, okay, ask ChatGPT this and then analyze how it could have been better. So something, those kinds of things. When we do projects, what I see students do, they more or less like get somebody's old projects and rebind it. How are we researching using the internet? So it just has to be taught into and put into our curriculum. So that's what I think about critical thinking. For technical education, is something that my organization, EdFit, did severe research on, because we thought, okay, let's look at how to fund it so that we can provide tuition loans for low-income households so that they have access to technical schools. First of all, good technical schools, we found, cost even more than university. So in Nigeria, where everybody wants to go to university, what's the incentive for you to go to a technical school? Government even has too few anyway, and mostly they won't have the required equipment. So if you are going to technical education, is more practical. So you need equipment that work, you need more than, so like when I went to one around Lekki and they teach building and so on and so forth, they had land, they had to build these houses and break them down. They show you how to actually plaster the wall, fix the doors, they had air conditioning. So it was more expensive, and the only way they were actually able, and this was a private technical vocational school, was that the German government gave grants for deportee Nigerians so that they can have skills. That's the only way that school was able to remain open. So, and we estimated that it cost about 750,000 naira per term to train someone in technical education, compared to universities that we were doing the research is less than 100,000 in some places in public school, in public universities. So why will you pay for your child 750,000 to be a carpenter when you can pay 100,000 to be a doctor, kind of, if you have the same abilities? So those are some of the things with technical education. I think that's another area that public-private partnership is required. You should give scholarship, especially where you align it to the national development strategy. So if we say we will need engineers, we want to do real estate, building, all those kind of things, are we ready to put the scholarship so that they are properly trained in technical colleges? And I even have some other arguments too, that I don't see why universities too don't even offer technical education. Maybe this is because I'm not an educator. There's nothing that says you can't have BSc in carpentry. If everybody wants a BSc, then give them. I know that like in the US and even UK too, now you had BSc nursing. When my mom, who was a nurse of blessed memory, was going to school, nursing wasn't a degree program, but now it is. So because there was a shortage of nurses, they wanted to upskill and upgrade that. So who says that you can't do that? So those are some of the things that I just sort of feel should be done, because we just need to solve this problem of human capital. We need our people to have the required skills and have access to education.
Thank you for that. So we have 5 hands up. Well, now 4. So we can group them, maybe take 2 at a time, and then we'll take the next batch. That way we get more people to ask their questions. So the first question is Faye. Faye, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. If you can keep it brief.
Yes, thank you very much, Ma. So I'll just go straight to the question. My question is, what kind of bilateral partnership can exist between Nigeria and developed countries aimed at improving the education sector in Nigeria? Also, if you can help me to break it down into state / city partnership, that is, for instance, a Berlin-Kano education partnership. What kind of bilateral agreement can exist between these? Thanks.
Thank you, Faye. I'm going to take the second question. Ms. Stone Ajibade, please go ahead with your question. Unmute yourself. So I've asked you to unmute. Can you unmute yourself? Can you try to unmute yourself, please? Okay, I'll go to Professor Grange. Go ahead, Ma, if you can unmute yourself to ask a question.
Okay. Okay. Right. Madam, thank you very much for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
I would like to add my voice to those of Pastor and Jumoke that you should be our next Minister of Education. So maybe if we all say this, it will actually happen. And I wish it would happen. Now, but whilst wishing you to be the minister, I would like to suggest that the most important thing will be to restructure the ministry where you are going into. Because you see, the minister per se does not have the exclusive power to actually take decisions, as you know. He must be regulated by the executive and the legislature. And if he gets into problems, then the judiciary comes in. So you have all those players there. And it is important, therefore, to be in alignment with, first of all, the executive, who would have appointed the minister. And if there is no alignment between the executive and the minister, then the legislature gets the overriding decision-making power. So just to let you know that these are problems that have made many ministers ineffective.
Yes.
The second area, which I think will need to be looked at, is what are the external forces that are sort of interested in Nigerian education system. I'm talking about, external aid, like UNESCO's aid. I don't know the rest of them. I know it for health, but not, but I'm sure that there are quite many. The big problem there also is that there is no coordination with them. So the ministry has to have real coordination before you can make very good use of such aid. Then you have also mentioned that there is lack of orientation of the people themselves to appreciate what is quality education. Of course, that starts with lack of basic education of the people themselves. So we have to recognize that feedback loop, that whilst you are teaching them about critical thinking, we must put in the fact that they need to appreciate quality, whatever quality services are being given, whether it's education or health or whatever, they need to appreciate those. Then there is also well, I don't think that you forgot, but probably there wasn't enough time to mention that people with disability need a special slot in the educational system. Because if we don't fit them in, they become, we are not even going to be able to get the value that they can put into nation building. And many of them can. I'm not talking only of physical disability, also those with diverse mental ability. Okay, so we need to find out what you are going to do about them. You have pinpointed the major problem with our systems. Our politicians do not see the development of systems as a quick win. Now, how we are going to make them see it, I would love you to be able to work out something which we can all share, because it's not just in education, it's in everything, health, whatever, anything like that. They just want to see the buildings. We talk about primary care. They are there building primary care, buildings, not human resource development. And human resource development is education. So, you're quite right that this is a big problem. I think I will stop here because there are other people who would like to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma. Mrs. Lawson, do you want to take those two questions or should we add tone to it?
Okay. Yeah, you could add to it. So
okay.
As you were talking about typing, so.
Okay. Go ahead. Tone, please go ahead and ask your question.
Madam, you've done an excellent job. Perfect delivery. Thank you so very much. Yes. Nigerians, we are blessed. We are really, really blessed. And I join my voice with the others ahead of me that we have a minister for education. Front of us. I believe God will honor our desire and you fulfill much more than our expectations in Jesus' name. Well done, ma'am. My concern, really, you mentioned the 5 core of quality education, read, write, critical thinking, values, and skills. I've come to realize that the 5 core are almost non-existent in our public education as it were. If they are, we are not saying it. Somebody gave me an application, a CV to submit for her. I didn't quite look at it. I just gave it to the person. About 30 minutes after, the person came around and said, Boloti, where do you see this kind of thing? And I look at the covering memo, the CV, everything was She studied geography. The whole thing was like Lawson, and I was like, for crying out. But luckily, she was ready to learn. She was very, very malleable. And to the glory of God, we were able to do 1 or 2 things. Where I'm going today, I think it's national calamity because money is now everything everyone is looking out to. You enter a shop, you want to buy something. The person selling, the owner of the shop does not even know what he or she is selling. If you are not patient enough, they tell you they don't know. Then you have to look around and say, this is what I want. They say, oh, is that what you want? Sometimes they'll give you change. You have to be patient enough. Most of the time for me, they overpay me. So I'm like, you open a shop big like this, you don't know money. You cannot read the names or what is written on what you are selling. So it's a calamity. Not to talk of those who are in public service. You see somebody telling you because it's a graduate, he does not know how to use the photocopier. He does not know how to use the adding, pockets, my calculator. all those basic things, you start wondering that what have you actually acquired in the number of years spent in university? So I believe is going back to the very rudiments of education, getting people who are really passionate about the future of Nigeria and the quality of people we want to leave this nation behind to by the time we are gone. I believe God will help us. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, madam, and all the best. I'm congratulating you ahead.
It doesn't seem you can escape from that Minister of Education. It's been conferred upon you and it's been seconded, thirded, and fourthed. So yeah, if you could take those 3 questions and then we'll go to the next 3.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the nice comments. I would just say it's because of the presentation. To talk about the Minister of Education, I do feel there are a lot of people that already have years in education that are very suitable for that role. I can mention names, and some of them have done really well in states. And my dear friends that are also in ERIT, because they started ERIT, but because of the passion I have for education, I joined them. So there are a lot of people that are in those places that, you know, I feel I'm more qualified than. But thank you for the compliments. I really do appreciate them. So to take the questions, what kind of bilateral partnership should we have with the international community, so, in terms of countries? And I find it to be a very interesting question, because I think, like, you know, when I think about financial services, I've seen a lot of countries pour money into Nigeria, but I actually haven't seen the same thing with education. I would say it's only Bridge Academy that has been sort of the flagship. I know they've done a lot of research and so on, but I do feel that, you know, an investment in education would be key. Do we have specific grants or, you know, bilateral arrangements about education exchange, you know, especially with basic education? So I just found that to be a very interesting question. It's one that I hadn't really thought of, because, you know, if I talk about international community, I'm always thinking about health sector and financial services, but nothing says that we can't do that for education. Beyond research, implementing things like the Bridge Academy, how do we transform technology in schools and basic education? How do we improve literacy? Actual programs that are actually implemented, teacher exchange, teacher training, especially, you know, because, you know, what were the transfer? And then the structural reform that Prof talked about in terms of how do we restructure, because that honestly is a table shaking requirement, and, you know, a lot of people would be against it. And so looking at how those reforms have been done in other countries and how can we implement them here. So I also want to just support everything that Prof said. In fact, when they called Prof Grange, I was initially scared that those are the people that should be Minister of Education. Certainly, I liked a lot of the comments that she shared around, you know, what is wrong with education today. That structure thing, I know Eric keeps raising it about how do we restructure education. We have too many parastatals, both at state level and national, you know, and just makes the governance of education in Nigeria really poor. So one question she said was, how do we make them change their mind and see that education is really important? It's people holding governments accountable. We just need to keep putting our voices out there, calling for the reform that is required. Eric tried to do a school transformation program in one of the schools. We want to roll it out as a model across all schools. That hasn't really seen the light of day. So we just need to continue to hold government accountable and, you know, vote for people who have education as a passion and see it as a requirement. And I think, you know, that issue of having a national development strategy, to me, is the roots, is the foundation that is required so that we align education to it. So because they can see that, okay, if I say this is the strategy that I have, I can't implement it without the people. So therefore, I have to educate them. So something like that. And you talked about people living with disability. Really, that's, special needs education across, from learning disabilities to physical disabilities. And, I do think we don't, if able-bodied people, full body without any disability are complaining about the level of education. I just dread to imagine what people who have some disability or the other are facing when it comes to education in Nigeria. So then Tonu talked about the 5 areas that I highlighted, and the money, and just basically that education is poor, and truly we need to do it. I think everyone needs to contribute into education. One of the things I was also wondering to address the issue of teacher shortage was, is there a way for us to have, a teacher training that everyone can quickly do, maybe a 3-month program that then give you an ability to teach, so that even in your own community, maybe you're setting up, or your village that you come from, you're setting up a community school, or, teaching that can help. And even people that retire, I also feel they're not sharing their knowledge enough. Anytime I tell my staff, oh, you don't know how to use Excel, go to YouTube. I see the Indians, just, they've come up with how to use Excel on YouTube, just the training. And by the time you look at it, you see 1 million views and all of that. So I think those are things that we ourselves too can do to help increase the number of people that are reached in spreading education. So that's those. I think I've answered all the 3 questions.
Yes, I believe you have
questions in the chat too, but I'm not able to read everyone.
I'll get those for you as well. Okay. I'll get those for you. So we're going to take the next set of 3, and then I would get questions from the chat. So the next hand up is Mr. Bayo. Please go ahead, Bayo, unmute yourself and ask your question. If you could keep it brief, appreciate that.
Hello, madam. Thank you so much. I enjoyed your presentation too. So thank you so much. My question is quite straight to the point. I would like to ask what you think about apprenticeship education, the system of apprenticeship into education. And secondly, I also like to ask, how do we check abuse of power in institutions of learning? We have a lot of that in Nigeria, where people abuse their power, lecturers abuse their power. And okay, I think I'll just stay with those 2. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for keeping that. So we have Prince Akinwale Ojomo. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hello. Yes. Sorry. Thank you so much, ma'am, and thank you for sharing the knowledge. So my comment and question is in the area of projects or tools that are being used that are actually shareable. I'm in diaspora, for instance. I know a lot of diaspora are really interested on how to leverage and support some of these local projects. And I have an opportunity to interface in Edo State. I know of Edo Best in terms of their digital learning. And I know such can even be shared even across the states. So my question is this: how do you now collate or to have an assemblage of some of these so that it becomes accessible? So even through your banking institution, then it can be supported from the diaspora, because as education is part of SDG, a lot of diaspora are really interested to be part of this. But sometimes they get confused because there's no way they can get to and see how those. So everybody just do things in their own silos. So I guess my point is this: how will you be able to work with diaspora to, kind of put this thing together so that people can have access to it, and easy funding can be accessed as well, and even so those who want to do some non-profit project. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Julia, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Good evening, madam. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I can.
Okay, good evening. Well done. You've spoken well. Please, my question is, in the North, the number of children that are out of school is alarming. I wonder if it's because of the notion they have that Western education is for the Westerners. So if it is that, can these children can they go through an orientation to help them appreciate and welcome education? That's one. Then another one about quality teachers. I am in the system, and most times when we call teachers for macro teaching, you see some teachers say something like, I don't know this, I don't know this topic, I don't know how to. I wonder, why is this person a teacher? What does he want when she cannot do this? And that same person will go somewhere else and be employed. So that's one of the reasons that some schools are having unqualified teachers. Then that's a contribution though. Then another one I want to say is that why are teachers placed at the background here in Nigeria by the government? If you go to Ghana, if you go to US, UK, teachers are well respected and you see everybody loving to teach. But some people are kind of, they want to be withdrawn. They are leaving. They want to teach. They don't want to be called teacher because they are not respected here. So why is it? Why is that? Why does the government treat teachers the way they do? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay.
Thank you. I think those are 3 questions, if you can take those. And okay, we'll take one last one after you're done with this one. I see one more hand up.
Yes, so thank you very much. So Mr. Bayer asked about entrepreneurship. What do I think? I mean, it's not entrepreneurship, apprenticeship. And it took me to entrepreneurship, yes. So I think it's a very valid means of learning. However, I do think the ability to read, write, and think. So I'm not in support of where, in the past, you have young children who haven't gone to school, they are assigned to somebody, they work there for free for years, they say they are learning, then they get freedom and all those kind of things. I do think the apprenticeship needs to be structured. So you must be able to read, write, and think before you start an apprenticeship program. There is, the story about the ABBA apprenticeship program and how that has worked. And I do support that for, the purpose of entrepreneurship, which is you stay with someone, learn the business, and then set up your own. But I think it should not be, you shouldn't compromise the issue of the literacy, that you must be able to read, write, think, and, the values before you start an apprenticeship program. That's what I think with that. But I think it's also a very valid way to learn, especially for vocational studies. How do we check the use of power in the institution of learning? There's, ASU, and I just sort of feel the world too much power, and, so I think, I don't know the answer actually. I think that if we have people who really love teaching, yes, teachers should be paid well. Universities should be more or less, able to generate their revenue. Because when I'm thinking about in private universities, why don't we have that? It's more about governance and management, and the fact that those kind of things will not be tolerated. Whereas in public schools, it's tolerated. They create systems and design them in such a way that there's bottlenecks that therefore you need to, it just gives a few people too much power. And I think that human beings, when you have too much power, you tend to abuse it. So that's the kind of thing. It's more about governance and management and not tolerating those kinds of behaviors. Prince Akiwale talked about how do the people in diaspora support projects. So first, I will first say that there are a lot of non-governmental organizations doing a lot of work in the area of education. And then I will drill down to giving you the example of ERIT. I've shared their website address, eritteams.org. Please direct those in diaspora to support the work that ERIT does. We're building a community of people who are passionate about education. And then we implement projects, like I mentioned, the school transformation project. So Nigerians in diaspora, we do call on you. There's a significant role that Nigerians in diaspora can do to help with education, but try to look for credible nonprofit organizations that are implementing projects. There, Slum to School is another one. There are quite a lot, so please do check online, but also remember ERIT. That's the one I'm passionate about. Then you have, Juliet asked about in the North, why are children not going to school? So I would first talk about the level of poverty. So you wonder which one comes first. Is it because they didn't go to school, that's why the poverty levels are high, or, and then there are cultural, religious issues, I think is not one issue that leads to that. So, but one of the things that I just sort of feel that depending on people's culture, behaviors, and norms, how do we design an education system that then fits into that cultural norm? I remember when this number of out of children came out, especially in the North, Northerners, there was this debate, did they add the Almajiris and people who go to Muslim school and all of that? Did they add them because they can read and write? So what are we defining as children out of school? So those are some of the things. So I feel that within the culture, is there a way to design an education program that fits into the way their values and the system so that we get the children still educated? So, and that's another area that I feel technology could help, use of, interpretation into different languages as well, so that they don't see education as removing the child from those cultural or religious beliefs they have, or unless it's totally detrimental to that child. So for instance, if I'm not saying that it is so, but if the religious believes that women should not read and write, then that's totally wrong. But I don't think that that's the case. It may just be, okay, women shouldn't mix with men. So how do we have more female teachers? Can we use, what's it called? Zoom or virtual means to be able to still reach into those places and teach them? How do we adapt their culture and still teach their ability to read, write, and think? So that's what I sort of feel is the solution there. Teachers. So, some people go into teaching just because they're looking for a job. And I know that a lot of people in the private sector, especially private, low-cost private schools, have that issue. People are just looking for a job. It's not that they love teaching. I do feel that you have to have a passion for teaching, the patience, so I feel that there's a character trait for a teacher. My younger sister is a teacher. She was a teacher in Nigeria, but because the pay and all of that, she said, I don't want to change my profession. So she went abroad. She's in the UK, and she's still a teacher. When I see her teach, primary school teacher, the passion, the joy she feels when somebody is able to learn is something that I find missing in a lot of our teachers. So how can we make teachers know that there's reward for their jobs? And already there's BSc education. So even though, like I was saying that if you want to give some jobs prestige, maybe make it BSc. But there are other things that I also feel. There was a time I was advocating that we need teachers. We have a shortage. You say that people who are teachers would not pay tax, for instance, maybe for the first 5 years, or if you're in basic education, you're not going to pay tax. I'm sure that the taxation of teachers is not what is going to transform or make Nigeria poor. So those kinds of things that sort of give reward. Does it mean that so if they have a teacher card, you can get free transportation? So BRC doesn't ask you to pay for the transportation, something that just sort of makes teachers feel, oh, there is a special, government needs us and they're giving us some special reward that doesn't really cost, it doesn't have to be that you are just increasing salary, something that makes them feel, so maybe even free HMOs for all teachers, the government one, you know, so those are things I feel that can be done to just make teachers feel they're very important and improve the you know, people should, someone was asking me that how many people do you know that when you go to secondary school, they say, oh, I want to become a teacher? You know, very few. So I think we need to elevate the teaching profession.
Thank you very much. And so we're going to take the last two questions. And like you said, those incentives, because without teachers, where would the nation be, right? Without those basic education and them really stepping into that role to educate the citizens, where would we be? So we need to applaud and appreciate our teachers more. I'm going to take the two hands that are up. Those will be the last hand, two sets or two hands that we take, and then I'll read a couple of questions from the chat as well. I'll just summarize them for you. So Engineer Femi Olowe, please go ahead with your question. Unmute yourself.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, Madam, thank you very much. What you have presented so far, and thank you for the analysis. My contributions are in terms of comments and also some suggestions, while some like questions. So number one is, based on what we're talking on abstinence from education, especially the Almanjiris, for me, I think one of the things that could fix that in Nigeria is to redefine quota system redefinition. So what is the rate of education in the South, in the East, in the North, in the all geopolitical zones? And then if, for example, out of 1,000 people, you always have 2 people to be educated, then that's enough data to say that if we want to, if we want to appoint or we need people in our MDAs, this should also form the quota system definition that we're going to take. So you will not leave 1,000 people that are educated in the Northeast, for example, and say you will pick one person there for a particular position, and then you are going to pick one person from Northwest where you have 100 people that are educated. So obviously it should be where you have many more people that are educated, you should pick more, you should use more in governance than where they are not educational disadvantage, but they abstain from education. So this is just by the way. Okay, madam, I want to say that I think in Nigeria, our education system needs or the curriculum, especially secondary school and primary school and early secondary school, we need to revisit and redefine and review the curriculums. So in a situation whereby we learned about pinhole camera, who is using pinhole camera? Yes, the principles behind them are okay. The history of camera or imaging in the world is okay. But dwelling on it, making it come out in the exams, they are not adding any value. So we need to sit down, and as part of total overhaul of education system in Nigeria, we need to redefine our curriculum. Then the third one that I want to talk about is that the analysis you gave, quite okay, ma, but I just want to implore that you may want to do more using your platform, ma. And what is it all about? You mentioned the Western world, the developed world, the percentage of their budgets spent or devoted to education, while Nigeria is doing about 4%. Now, we need to also know what are the component parts of the 6%. Is it building of structures? Is it equipping libraries? Is it a student loan? I mean, just the components of the 6%, 7%, 5% that countries that are doing better than us, what are the components, what are the splits of this devotion? So that, because in Nigeria, you know, our leaders, once you say, even if we include it in the constitution and we take it to 6%, that you should not do minimum, whether states, local government and federal government don't do below 6%. And it is enshrined in our constitution. When they want to do this 6%, you find out that they are changing roof, they are doing ceiling, they are, you know, things that are not. But then if your group goes further to get the split, perhaps, and this data is available to the government, maybe they might want to think and say, this is the area we are going to be spending this money. So those are just my contributions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. So the last question, or the last hand I have up is Mrs. Noyo Kubenje Edem. Madam, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Thank you.
Yes. Good afternoon, all of you. Good evening, those of us in Nigeria, those of you in Nigeria. I know I wasn't here throughout the presentation, so my question may sound as if, oh, I've already discussed that. I'm sorry if that's it. What I want to ask is about how to evaluate the progress made. You've given us a lot of information, which would be very helpful if we implement them. But then the area of project evaluation to actually find out if we are achieving our goals. So what will we be doing? What should we do? How are we going to do that? I believe in basic literacy, as you said, that if everyone can read and write, but I think that is principally for self-development. Apart from that, it will also be good if we can teach our children to acquire skills hands-on, where they can actually acquire skills along with reading and writing. That would be very, very good if we have something like that. So this is like technical education, as we have in most countries around the world. There's something else. We find out that we have a Ministry of Education. I don't know if you still have the primary education board, state primary education board. Then you have, when I was in Nigeria, we used to have the nomadic education board. And I think they had something for the people in the Riverine area too. So you find out that you have all these agencies of governmental agencies that duplicate the same functions, same duties. A lot of money is wasted. Because I worked at the National Primary Education Commission Kaduna. At that time, we had the nomadic education board. So a lot of money, grants given, money to go out to monitor schools and everything, but a lot of money wasted. Why do we have a Ministry of Education and now we are having all these other agencies? Perhaps maybe we need one or two, but not so many. If we can just have it from one place that monitors and takes care of everything, ensuring that the schools receive the instructional materials, material they need, the infrastructure is in place, and children are attending school, I think that would be fantastic. We'll be able to achieve a lot. So it's just in the area of actually evaluating what we are doing, and if there's any progress, measurable progress that you can see that yes, within 3 years, 4 years, this is what we have been able to achieve. And if we are not moving forward, then we can track and now go back and readjust that, okay, this is where we have failed and well, this is what we should be doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam, I have one more hand up, and that would be the very, very last. Shegun, please go ahead with your question. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you. Good evening.
All right. So mine is more of a solution. Actually, I belong to a school of thought that government spending is like no other spending. If government spends, no matter how many private sector investments we have, we can't go wrong. So that's why education is actually a kind of commodity that is preserved for not just for money making, but for government's responsibility. So where I'm coming from now is that in order for us to be creative, to challenge the wastage and pilfering of public resources towards education, I think it's high time we have a network of private and CSOs, that's civil organizations, that would hold government accountable only for the educational sector. All right, so there's this thing where we're trying to do. I went through some documents and I saw that it actually can be worked in Nigeria, where a state has both the representatives from some of the private sector to come and form a network that would hold government accountable in terms of, bringing in accountability sessions, writing requests for periodic budgeting, expenses, review. If these things are not done, nobody will do it. You won't expect the auditor that is supposed to be, actually every MD has an audit unit. But these audit units are also they are expressing state capture. So it's left for the CSOs, the few good ones, and some of we that are the private sector that really put fire to their feet and ask questions. So we need these questions to be asked. Right now, I don't think we have that luxury of time. We are behind time when you rank what has been going on for the past how many years. If you look at the statistics, the millions of children out of school. So what, instead of us trying to review the problem over and over, I think we should try having this kind of sub-network or in regions, whereby we hold, by mere fact that you're a citizen, you have that right actually to ask questions. How was the money spent? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You want to go ahead and take those questions? And the comments in the chat were mostly
a lot of them, yes.
They're mostly comments.
A lot of them were mostly comments that I largely agree with. I'm going through some of the notes that I liked. The question from I think Mrs. Sorry how to pronounce her name, that talked about how do we evaluate progress that has been made. So that's one thing I certainly want to talk about. And the key easy way to start is number of out of school children. We should have KPIs, defined KPIs. How many children are out of school? Have we been able to reduce the number? Even unemployment rates. How many people are dropping out of schools? Literacy rates. So how do we measure that? Have we gotten to the 70% benchmark? Are we crossing to 80%? So those are some of the KPIs. Unemployment rate too is an indication of poor education. Because even if you have good education, even if they are not creating enough jobs, you would do entrepreneurship and those will create jobs. And, even the so-called Jacqua syndrome, I don't have anything against it. As I kept showing, the remittances back to Nigeria, far justifies, they add value to society. And if I look at other countries that have actually done well, India, China, they had a large population in diaspora as well that supported them and brought back knowledge, skills, values that certainly added to the quality of their human capital. So that's that. Yes, also in terms of having so many boards and so, in fact, as she was talking about the nomadic board and all of that, there is a bill in front of the House about Christian education. That's, so are we going to have Muslim education bill, Christian bill? It's just creating additional structures, whereas what we need is to streamline them and focus, really, I would say, more on basic education. Holding government accountable is one of the things that Mr. Shegun talked about. And I think, yes, we need, I wish that we should ask all ministries, where's your audited report, your KPIs, where's your performance report? Citizens need to start asking each department, what is your deliverable? So other than, because all that they actually have as KPIs, I would say is just monitor that, okay, they allocated this budget and what percentage have you spent? That cannot be the basis of monitoring government's performance. So we certainly need, as citizens, to demand for more than that. And I think the very first person basically was more about giving comments on the need to reform education, especially for basic education. That, you gave the example of the pinhole camera. Why are we still learning that? I totally, as I mentioned during my presentation, the overhaul of the curriculum is critical, to us achieving what we want. And I think that would lead from defining a national development strategy. Where do we see our nation going? And tailor all our education and efforts towards that national strategy. So I think I covered most of the education. Okay, yes. The one point that the speaker made was about giving people, the quota system should be based on the level of education. It's an interesting concept. I'm not sure it's one I support. What I support is to make sure that everybody has access to education. And if we do that, the removal of the quota system in all ramifications, that's what I feel should be done. But so just to comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Before I hand over back to Mr. President for the closing remarks, I also just wanted to say that we at our ALG, we're doing our part in trying to promote civic education. So we've come up with the Citizens Responsibility course that just helps inform everyone of their civic duties and also to be informed in contributing to this nation building. The courses or the modules that we have just really gives basic information or introductory courses on politics, the Constitution, knowing your rights, knowing your local government officials, what are bills, and just those political needs that we believe that if we're informed, so it may not be secular education, but there are different components of education that we as a community really need to promote. So we've posted that link in the chat room, and we ask that you please, if you're interested in being a part of this first cohort, go ahead and fill that form, and then we'll notify you on when we'll be starting. In this first, what we're calling the basic level 1, there are about 5 modules that we will be taking through. It's simple. It's not, you don't need a PhD or a college degree to be able to go through that. Is really very basic information that everyone will be able to participate in. So we ask that you please join that, and we're going to be rolling this out over a period of time. So I wanted to put that plug in. And the second form we have in the chat is also the national values. What is important to you? What are some of the values that is important to you as a Nigerian? So please, that's a survey that we are posting out there. So thank you, Madam, for a brilliant presentation. And it's definitely a session that I'm going to go back and review because there's so many points, and we'll definitely be reaching out to you. We have an education committee at ALG, and part of what we're trying to do is really do this gap analysis of what you have just done, and how do we as a community, not just government, but we as citizens also engage in reforming the education system. And I particularly like the fact, your point about some of these public buildings that are open, like churches, using some of those churches whether it's one day during the week where we have volunteers that will teach people in the community just basic skills. So that's something that we definitely would be reaching back to you to tap into your expertise. And hopefully we'll be seeing you in Abuja in Aso Rock as the Minister of Education. It doesn't seem like you're going to get away from that. But thank you so much. It was brilliant. Really enjoyed it. And we'll be in touch. So I'm going to hand over back to Mr. President for his closing remarks. Thank you so much.
My Honorable Minister of Education.
Mr. President.
That sounds nice, and I think it works. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a very, very rewarding and informative evening. And like Jumoke said, we will get together with you and at the very least do a roadmap for education in Nigeria and then see how we can be part of a quick win process to support education in Nigeria and information and reorientation so that we can have a nation going forward. Thank you so much. God bless you. Enjoy the rest of your evening and the rest of your weekend. My love to the kids, and we'll catch up as soon as we can. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I read some of the comments in the chat. Thank you very much for the kind words. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for coming. See you next week, Jumoke. Well done as always. Thank you so much. Marcella, thank you. Good to see you. And Alabambo, good to see you also. Thank you so much. God bless everyone. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
One more thing. We have a the Peace Dialogue series in collaboration with RNI tomorrow. Same time, we'll also be sending our participants a link to that discussion, the Peace and Reconciliation Dialogue series.
Okay, please try and join that. It's also very important. We do that every 2 weeks. Okay, thank you. God bless you.
Nigeria Leadership Series virtual town hall meeting, which holds every Thursday 5 p.m. West African time, same Zoom link as displayed on your screen. To help curb hackers, kindly rename yourself if you entered the platform with the name of a device. We ask that you keep your comments in the chat kind and respectful. We do not condone violent, abusive, or divisive language of any kind. Help disseminate the weekly flyer to your contacts and social media handles and subscribe to the YouTube channel displayed on your screen. If you are interested in engaging with ALG, please complete the form displayed on your screen. ALG School of Leadership and Governance, SOLAG, will launch its Citizens Responsibility course in June 2023. To register and attend the course, please complete the form displayed on your screen. Please support ALG's Nigeria Sacrificial Fund, created to raise funds for the development and execution of ALG's The Nigeria Project Challenge, grouped into the following 10 components: RLN, Right Leadership in Nigeria; CR2N, Constitution Review and Restructuring Nigeria; MBCE, Nation Building, Enlightenment and Citizen Empowerment; PRDU, Peace, Reconciliation, Dialogue and Unity; CEOOSC, Championing Education and Out-of-School Children; TAAC, Transparency, Accountability and Anti-Corruption; TAEP, Transparent, Accountable Electoral Processes; WINB, Women in Nation Building; YEP, Youth Empowerment for Nation Building; LOGROD, Local Government Resource Opportunity Development, and send your sacrificial contributions to the account information displayed on your screen. Please note that ALG runs a transparent account system and will provide quarterly reports on all funds received and expended. For more information on ALG, please visit the website at www.africaleadershipgroup.org. You can also send an email to membership@africaleadershipgroup.org or call 0703-187-1514. Please check out ALG's social media handles on LinkedIn and Instagram with the handles displayed on your screen. Thank you. Welcome to Africa Leadership Group, the Nigeria.
Thank you all for joining us. God bless you. See you again next week. Have a wonderful day. God bless you.
God bless you.